Welcome to the Authentically Successful Show. I'm Carol Schultz, founder and CEO of Vertical Elevation, a talent equity and leadership coaching and advisory firm. Listen at the end of the show for information about becoming my next guest on one of the most important podcasts for building thriving companies. Here we go. Welcome to the Authentically Successful Show. I'm Carol Schultz. Joining me today is Steve Hoffman, founder and CEO of Founderspace, a global startup accelerator. Founderspace has 50 partners in 22 countries and was founded in January of 2010. Steve, welcome to the show.
Carol, fantastic to be here.
Well, I am happy to have you because I think you're doing something super interesting. Tell me a little bit more about Founderspace and what it means when you say 50 partners.
So Founderspace, actually, we began in San Francisco. We opened our incubator there and we started to grow. This was back, over a decade ago, and everybody was coming to Silicon Valley to find out the Silicon Valley magic. So at first, we were taking in entrepreneurs from all over the world because we became known as kind of the landing pad for where foreign entrepreneurs would come and enter Silicon Valley. And then we started to be invited overseas. So by governments, by different accelerators, different institutions, we would actually go over there, send our instructors over to run courses. Okay. And in the process, we set up some of our own Founderspace branded incubators. Mm-hmm. We also partnered with existing incubators where they run the whole show. And we literally come in with our instructors and give kind of a dose of Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. So when we say partners, the partners are usually other incubators. Some of them are government agencies that run incubators, or they are our business partners who run Founderspace overseas with us.
Well, that's really interesting. What was the impetus behind this business for you?
The impetus, well, I'd done 3 venture-funded startups. I'd done a bootstrap startup.
Right, which we're going to talk about, yeah.
And I'm a passionate entrepreneur for everybody who knows me. And my friends started to come to me and they were like, help me. Like, how did you raise your money? What did you go through? Like, can you look at my business plan? And I started to coach them. And I have a blog that became popular and people just started to come out of the woodwork. And so we set up what we called roundtables before we really started, which was where we got a bunch of entrepreneurs. I invited some angel investors, some lawyers, other people to really help them at the early stages. And then a guy I knew who later became my partner, he had been running one of the successful co-working spaces, Soma Central in San Francisco. And he's like, look, I have this whole section of space we're not even using. And I was like, well, let's join forces and open Founderspace, call it Founderspace there, and get entrepreneurs and run this accelerator.
So what's the difference or distinction, among Founderspace, Techstars? I mean, there's a million of them out there right now, accelerators. How do you compare, contrast yourself to some of these other ones?
Well, there were fewer when I began, but there's YC, Y Combinator, 500 startups, all these. Right. We began in a similar way to all of them. Mm-hmm. But where we ended up diverging was we saw an opportunity. Most of them were running 3-month, 6-month programs where you'd bring an entrepreneur in and they would just go through this whole program, maybe one day or one night a week. Right. And then you'd have a demo day. Mm-hmm. Well, we started to see all these overseas startups coming to Silicon Valley. They didn't have the money to stay 3 months or 6 months. It's extremely expensive.
Sure.
They also wanted to accelerate it to figure out, is it even a good fit to come to Silicon Valley with my startup? And then there were governments who actually had budgets. So they were paying for these entrepreneurs to come for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month to figure it out, to see if it would work. And we started to partner with them. So we envisioned ourselves as this kind of gateway. We had a lot of startups at the beginning from Silicon Valley, US startups, but then we started to combine those with overseas startups and create specialized programs. They were kind of, instead of going 1 day a week for 3 months, literally you'd go 2 weeks every single day. And we had our instructors, we'd be running through a really set course of things. We'd introduce them to a lot of people and a lot of investors. At the end of the 2 weeks, we'd invite investors in knowing that it wasn't a 3-month program, it was a 2-week program. These were overseas startups and they wanted to come in and check them out. A lot of times sometimes they would fund them, sometimes they would give them advice and so on and so forth, whatever they could do to help them. And that became the core.
What's the magic behind the 2 weeks, Steve? Because I've worked with hundreds of startups over my career, and again, very familiar with the various incubators and accelerators. And it's, I might think, and this is where I'm kind of curious as to, your opinion on this, right? And why it's been successful, is that 2 weeks could completely overwhelm somebody. There's just too much information to take in 2 weeks.
A lot of people said that, actually.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I got too much feedback from,
Right.
because we would literally we would open it up. We'd have mentors come in. They might talk to 30 mentors over the course of 2 weeks.
Right.
And we're like, look, your job in this 2 weeks is you don't have to make any decisions right now. Your job is to absorb as much information as you can. And then a lot of them were going back overseas, and then reflect on it and figure out, is this a good fit? Because you want a lot of points of view. You can't just trust like one or two people. You can't even trust me. I know, I have my own point of view. I think I'm right, but I'm not always right.
Right.
So I want to give you a lot of points of view, and I want to give you a lot of different relationships that you can follow up on. So yes, it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. You're not going to be able to really work on your business during these 2 weeks in the sense of like doing business dev, because we're going to have you this whole time. But what you're really going to be focused on is we're going to show you what gets funded in Silicon Valley, what business models work, what don't, what doesn't, how does yours fit? And then you're going to get to talk to real investors, real other people who are really plugged in, and they're going to give you their opinion. And hopefully you will come away with that, knowing whether you should invest more time into going much deeper. And a lot of our graduates, they would go on to like YC or other 500 startups, or they would just do their business. They'd meet people, help them with their business. But that was the thing. It was a crash course in getting into Silicon Valley.
Got it. Well, earlier on, you talked a little bit about, what you've done in the past. And I know after you got out of graduate school, you spent a year in Hollywood, a year in Japan with Sega Games, and then had the brilliant idea that, hey, I'm 24 years old. I can do it in my first startup. And that was with your wife.
It was.
Tell me a little bit about that particular startup.
So we just took our savings and decided to gamble it all. We did not take money from family and friends. And this is something I advise other startups to do. You never know. Like this one turned out successful, but you never know.
Right.
Like most startups fail when they're doing it. And I knew that it was really risky. So we're just going to spend our own money and we'll make do, like whatever we can do. So basically, I was lucky. I had a background in engineering. I could code, but I wasn't a great coder. I wasn't brilliant, but I was good enough. And I had this vision, and it was really inspired by my vision. So I'd been working for Sega, the big game company, and they had all these games like Virtua Fighter, which are really popular. And I was tired of working on fighting games. I wanted to make a game that was just as much fun as one of these shooter games, but that actually could teach people something, but you wouldn't consider it educational. You would consider it fun. Right. So my vision, it was called Gazillionaire. And the vision was that you're an entrepreneur. It's like what I do today. I teach entrepreneurs, ironically.
I love it.
But I was creating this game where you'd play it, really fanciful, really fun. I did all the graphics. My wife and I did them all. We had a few other artists. We had sound designers, but it's really us. It was a labor of love. We put this game out there. It was the early days. The internet barely existed. People didn't browse the web. They only had what was called bulletin boards, BBSs, if you can even recall, and you'd upload it to these BBSs. So we created this shareware game that we uploaded to BBSs and said, like, if you want to buy this, there was no e-commerce. You send us the cash in an envelope or a check.
Oh my God.
We'll cash it and we'll mail you this stack of floppy disks. You know who bought our first game?
Who?
Lord Geck. But of course, a total geek called Lord Geck, and he actually lived not far from us, just by chance. We invited him to our house for dinner. So we got to meet our first customer. But the game, which started off really small, wasn't super high tech, but really it was people loved the game. Like it was, the gameplay was really refined and the graphics were crazy and silly and people just loved it. It actually, the QA testers, quality assurance testers at the biggest PC game company in the world at the time, Spectrum Microprose, they actually had downloaded it from the BBSs and become addicted to it, become hooked on it. And so this huge game company comes to us and says, we have to publish our game by Christmas. Like, we want to get this game out there. And we literally cut a deal with them and they put it nationwide.
That's
and
awesome.
At that time, retail was a big thing. We got into all the retail stores. It did really well critically, did really well financially. And we went on to produce a series of these. And I tell you, it was a totally different experience than being in a venture funded company. And I loved it.
What year was this that you and your wife started this company?
Oh, this was like, we began in 1992. So
just before the internet came to the public.
Yeah,
right?
It was the early days of the internet. And we just took it from there. We learned by doing. Like, we had no experience. I didn't get an MBA. I didn't know business. I gone to creative part in film school, which I was using, the technical part. And then I just dove in.
What were the mistakes you made back then in this company, in LavaMind?
Well, by chance, there weren't too many big mistakes, a lot of little mistakes. So I'm always impatient. Like, I wanted to get that product to market really fast.
Yeah.
And I was cutting corners, but I was like, we're running out of money. We need to get this baby live. And then my wife was like, don't waste your time. You got to make it great. And so she pulled me back, and she made me redo the whole thing. Literally, I wasted time going down one path. I don't know if people even recall, but there was a thing called DOS, disk operating system. So I made a text version of it. And she was like, no, you got to make a Windows version, Windows. And it was Windows, the early days of Windows, And I was like, but I don't know if I can even technically do that. Well, if we don't do that, it's not worth doing. So we went down this wrong path, or I did. She course corrected me. We got it out there. And everything else went really well. I mean, we were sort of blessed in a way, because the thing was, this big game company that came to us, they had spent millions of dollars on the Star Trek franchise to make a game of that, literally millions of dollars. We were working on our whole game might have cost $12,000 at the end of the day, computers included, our laptops included. So they had spent millions. We had this little game, but they had missed, the game was running late. So they weren't going to book revenue in the calendar year. And when they heard their QA testers were onto this crazy little game, they came to us. We figured that out, and that gave us enormous leverage. So we kept all the rights to the game, which is normally they would take all the rights. But we were like, no, you have to, because we were so passionate. We were worried that they would just dump it and they wouldn't follow up. So we kept all the rights. So we still own it. We still own every product we ever made.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you went off and started another startup called Spider Dance. And this was your first foray into institutional funding, correct?
First foray, and it was brutal. It was brutal on so many levels, and very educational. So what was Spider Dance, and what had venture capitalists interested in giving you any money? So first of all, venture capitalists were not interested at all. And at this point in time, you have to remember, they had no incubators. The VC community was very closed. We couldn't even get meetings. We didn't know who to talk to. We didn't know anybody. I just produced my own little game. I didn't know how to raise funding. So it was a real struggle from day one. What we did was we had this massively multi-user gaming engine that one of my partners, he was a technical, brilliant guy. And it was the early days. They didn't have many massively multi-user games. So he had built this out originally, licensed it to Microsoft to run a game, and then he owned it. My vision was we would create a platform where all the developers in the world could get on our Spider Dance platform and run their games. Only I went out to the game developers all around the Bay Area, and none of them cared. They're single player's fine. And if we go with you and make this multiplayer, then we want you to change all these things, and we want to give you a tiny, tiny bit of money.
Yeah, right.
So literally, there was no business. It was too early, with so many companies. So we had to pivot. So we pivoted away from doing this developer platform, which would have been a great business later on, to a new product we called Jabber Chat. And at this time, chat was really big. They didn't have instant messengers, but chat on websites was brand new. People were chatting just like they would instant message. And we decided to create a game chat, a gamified chat where you chat and play word games at the same time. And it was so much fun. And JavaScript was brand new. So we created this plugin where anybody could actually cut and paste the JavaScript into their website. Then we got hundreds of websites to sign up. And we applied to South by Southwest, won first prize, but we had no money coming in. And, again, our funds are dwindling, we're spending all the money we had.
Yeah, right.
And we look out there in this real world and we're like, we got to make money. Oh, there's this thing called internet advertising, brand new. So there's this company out there, this internet advertising company, they don't exist anymore. And they said, we can put banner ads in your thing. So we're like, yeah, banner ads.
Right.
That will be cool. So we're one of the first people to embed banner ads in a JavaScript plugin to a website. We had hundreds of sites using it, lots and lots of users. We waited a month to see how much money we'd get. Did you know how much we got? $13.58.
Practically bubkas.
Yeah, like not even enough to buy our team a pizza.
Yeah, right, yeah.
We were like, oh my God, we're not making any money. So literally, we had to abandon this great start of an application because we had no venture funding. We had no money.
Right.
And then we heard that Viacom, MTV, wanted to produce an interactive TV show. We're like, yeah, maybe we'll do that. Like, this is the startup journey. So we literally didn't know how to synchronize online to on air. Nobody had figured that out at the time. But we did know we had a massively multi-user online engine. So we just we got the number of the senior vice president of MTV Interactive. And we literally started to call him. We started to say, we have what you need. We are Spider Dance. We can deliver that product you want.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? He never called back.
Gosh, there's a big surprise.
No, but
I would have been shocked if he had called you back.
Yes. So he just ignored, MTV is bombarded by people who want to get on.
Well, television. All executives are bombarded by people trying to sell them stuff.
Yeah. And he didn't know what
that was. I don't think it's any different now than it was then.
Yeah,
it's probably worse now. In fact, yeah.
Yes, but he didn't want to talk to us.
Right.
But my partner, because of her previous job in New York, had been invited to speak at CES, this big consumer electronics show. She got on the panel, and like all great entrepreneurs, she started talking about our dream. We're going to build interactive television. We have this platform we're working on, blah, 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 blah. After she gave her talk, somebody comes running up from the audience, barreling up, pushing through everybody, comes up right up to her, and he says, "You have exactly what I need."
Yes, and guess who that was?
I am the senior vice president of MTV Interactive.
Yeah, of course.
And she goes, "I know, we've been leaving voicemails for you for the past month." So literally, within a few weeks, we had a deal signed for $350,000 with MTV.
Yeah.
We were off to the rodeo. It was like, that was the birth of our company. But it wasn't so easy. Like $350,000 went to us, sounded like a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's really not.
It goes so fast.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to build something that had never been built before. They were like really worried. He was like, "Can you build this? You're a startup." Like this day, big companies didn't work with startups. They worked with established companies. They're like, "We don't know if you can do this." "Oh, we can do it. Absolutely. No problem. But how do you know?" "Well, we'll build it." So like we had nothing to lose and everything to gain, like working with MTV. We were like, "We'll get it done. Don't worry." But so he was always nervous, like from day one, but he had nobody else. So they went with us and we started to build that product and spend all our money because we had to make this work. And they had no AWS, nothing. Like we had to put all the servers in a co-location facility, get a T1 line, things that people don't even think about today.
Unless you're old like us. Yeah.
Yeah. With a team of 3 engineers.
Yeah.
Like it was brutal because that's all we could afford. But we were doing it and I was going out to raise money as a CEO. And literally, I couldn't get through to Silicon Valley, but I managed in Hollywood to get through to this big, brand new venture fund run by Hollywood luminaries. Like one was, he was, the head of NBC Universal. He had jumped onto this venture fund. He had Michael Milken, the junk bond king, the former president of Sega USA. All these different people like were on the board. We pitched them and they said they would fund us. We borrowed, we got a lawyer to actually extend us credit for $60,000.
Yeah.
And went through the whole thing negotiating this one contract, like all $60K. And at the end of the contract, we were like, okay, we got $5 million. It's done. We went to them and you know what they said? They're like, we actually changed our mind. We're going to fund you when you launch. We don't know if you're going to be a success when you launch. So we're going to wait. And we're like, "But we need the money now."
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, we're going to wait." So we had no choice. We had no other investors on the line. I didn't know any other investors. So we're like, "Oh, this launch better work." So we gear up for launch. Like we couldn't load test it. There was no software to test like how many users. MTV was literally every single day running multiple ads across their whole network.
Wow.
On what they called Web Riot. That was the name of the show. Amit Zappa was the host. And they were bombarding to get people in there. We're like, can we handle this load? But our engineers were just working like night and day, just night and day. We put the product out there on the market and the day came. And we had to be frame accurate. It couldn't be non-frame accurate because think about it. If the TV show was even, a second ahead of the online show, people could cheat and they were winning real prizes. They could see the answer on TV and cheat. So it had to be perfectly frame accurate. And it had to hold all these simultaneous users that we had never done all at once, bombarding coming in. We launched the show. We're holding our breath. It's running perfectly. 4 minutes into the show, it goes down. It crashes. A minute later, 30 seconds later, the phone rings. I pick it up. It is a senior vice president at MTV, and he is using every curse word you could possibly imagine. And I was like, just wait a second. Be calm. Let me talk to my engineers. Finally got him off the phone. Called my engineers. And I'm like, this system is down. They're going crazy. And they turned to me and said, it's not us. We are under a denial of service attack.
Oh, interesting.
Like there are trolls out there who saw all these ads and wanted to bring down MTV's hit show before. So they were bombarding us. And these days they didn't have the software, the firewalls to protect it. It was all like hand built. So they were literally blocking IP addresses like manually. Oh,
that's so interesting.
Within a couple minutes, the show went back on air. And then it ran flawlessly. Flawlessly. Okay. We never had another show go down. We were like, it was like a miracle. So we did it. We pulled it off. We go back to the venture firm. We're totally out of money. We had spent everything. Go back to these Hollywood sharks and we're like, give us our money. And they're like, okay, we'll give you the $5 million now, but we've changed our mind. We don't want to fund you at the valuation we told you. We want to cut it in half. What do you mean you want to cut it in half? Why? With the show went flawlessly. Everything was perfect. We did everything we promised because they knew we were out of money, and they don't call them vulture capitalists for nothing. They were the worst of like Hollywood and, So these people were squeezing us, and we had a choice. Like either we walk off the abyss because we had no other funders, and it was literally right before Thanksgiving, and all the venture money goes away until after CES, which is mid-January. So you have November to mid-January. We walk off a cliff, or we take the money from these despicable people. And we walked off the cliff. We said, screw you. We're not taking, we don't want you on our board. We don't want to ever look at you again. We don't care. It's the idea, we would be smarter to take your money, but we don't want to be in bed with you. And so we walked, and we instantly regretted it because we were suddenly in a whole nother world of pain. Felt good to walk, I'll tell you. Felt great. Felt really bad when we woke up the next morning. We had to beg our employees to keep working without money.
Yeah, right.
We had a hosting provider that we couldn't pay. We had MTV breathing down our back, and what were we going to do? So it was like the worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa you ever had. Whatever it is. We were in a world of pain. We went back to CS because we had already booked our flight, but we downgraded to the sleaziest hotel in Las Vegas Strip, and we could barely pull ourselves out of bed to go to the conference because we were so depressed. But I managed to get through to one person during that time, and that was the president of Macro Media. Now, Macro Media became Adobe. They merged and became Adobe. So it's really, And the president of Macro Media said, look, we can give you the money, but can you make this work with Flash? That was their new product, Flash, for gaming and video online. And they wanted a vehicle like the MTV to get it out there. I was like, I didn't know if we could, but absolutely. We will get it working with Flash. No question. Hand me the money. Well, I can't give you the money. We have to have a established venture capital firm lead the round. I can't write the check without them. We have a policy. Introduce me. So come after CES, we had to wait. He came, he introduced me to the first VC. And it was a big Sand Hill Road VC, those are the top tier VC firms. Walk in the door. He goes with me. And I'm like, why is he coming with me? And I realized he was coming with me to watch the reaction of the VC. Because if VC poked a bunch of holes in my business, I wasn't going to get any more introductions.
Yeah, sure.
Like, this had to work. So I was like, this is it. Like, this meeting is it. We go in there. The VC's sitting there. I do the pitch, and I don't let them know we're like running on fumes. We're about to go bankrupt in a couple of weeks. I just say MTV, all the, great stuff you do as a startup founder.
Right.
Of course, I never lie. He never asks, are you running on fumes? So I don't mention it. And I just give the whole pitch about MTV and how great it is. And then he's entirely stone-faced. I couldn't read him at all. And after my entire pitch, he goes, excuse me, gets up and walks out of the room.
Oh, shit.
I look at the president over there, and he doesn't know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, man. He comes back a few minutes later, and he sets down a piece of paper, and he goes, here's your term sheet. Like, what? A first meeting? Like, he just pitched?
Amazing.
I'd spent 6 months with that other venture firm. And then, here's your term sheet, but I'm not only going to give you $5 million, I'm going to give you $7 million at the valuation you asked for.
Awesome.
I was just like, awesome. I want this deal. I want it. But then I got control of myself. I was like, well, first of all, why is he giving me this term sheet? And I realized I had told him something in the pitch, and this is really educational for those people out there. I had dropped the line that this is the first company Macromedia, Adobe, is introducing us to, the first VC firm, meaning we were going to go be introduced to other things. He did not want to
miss out on the opportunity, did he?
It's fear and greed. If you're going to close a deal, the fear of losing the deal has to be greater than their fear of losing the money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't close a term sheet like that.
Yeah.
So I realized at that instant, he didn't want to let me go. If he let me walk, so I knew I had some leverage. And the second thing I did, I don't want to seem desperate, but I need this to close right away. But without letting him know that I'm absolutely desperate, because I saw what happened last time. So I told him, I said, we don't need 7. We only asked for 5. I took control. We only asked for 5 million. But I'll tell you what, we will take 6 million of your money if you can close in 2 weeks. And he goes, deal.
That's awesome.
And literally, we had the money in the bank 2 weeks later. He rushed his lawyer because he knew we were going to go to other people. We were riding our lawyer, closed the deal. That was the beginning of Spider Dance.
Got it. So at a high level, Steve, what became of Spider Dance and why? In the shortest amount of time you can tell us. I don't want to run out of time.
So we ended up closing deals for like the weakest link with NBC. We ended up close History Channel. We ended up closing Turner Broadcasting, all the networks like Warner Brothers. They're all our customers. We were riding high. We had an amazing buyout offer from a public company, but our VCs turned to us. I didn't know what I was doing. They said, no, we're worth like triple this. Do not take that offer, even though I thought it was pretty damn good. Then the dot-com bubble burst a few months later. Like literally after we turned down that buyout offer, everything started collapsing. It was just about the time we had to raise more money, our next round. And
nobody was giving out any money.
No, all the TV networks suddenly came back to us and said, we're going to stop paying you. We were paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars for this, but literally we aren't going to run interactive TV shows anymore because we need to cut. Everybody's cutting. Like an interactive, we don't even believe in this internet stuff. So they were like, everybody cut us. Like, Scott Sassa, head of NBC, came to me and he said, look, we love what you're doing. We love your work. But if you can sell out the advertising, you can keep running the show.
Right.
What do we know about selling out ads?
Yeah, sure.
And nobody's buying ads at this time, like especially on weird interactive TV shows. So we literally, and we'd taken out $3 million in debt financing. So we had this huge loan. We had this huge deluxe offices in LA and Los Angeles that we were paying for. All these employees, like 30 employees. It was brutal. We started scaling down and cutting people and scaling down till it was just the 4. We were like back to the 4 founders, like sitting in this giant office. And what we had to do is I didn't want to go bankrupt because that's like a nightmare. So I went to our landlord and said, look, we will get out of the offices right away if you just let us off the hook. We have no money. Trust me. And he knew the dot-com thing was happening. He goes, just get out of the offices. I went to the company that had loaned us the $3 million. They were in bankruptcy because they had loaned so much money that dot-coms imploded.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, and they had hired an ex-Marine to bully me. But I took to this ex-Marine. I was like, look, you're not going to get any money up. We will give you everything we have. We'll give you all our computers, all our furniture, and our IP. Just forgive our debt. He basically did the deal and we could walk away. So that was the best outcome I could get in a horrible situation.
So looking back, do you think, could this have been in any way, shape, or form predictable?
I asked myself over and over, my gut was to take that first buyout offer. But it is of so many first-time founders. And then my rational side said, look, these venture capitalists have done this over and over and over.
They know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Am I really not going to take that? So if I'd followed my gut, I would have taken the money and run and been a very happy camper. But I ended up not doing that. And I thought I was doing the logical thing, like the smart thing at the time. So was it predictable? Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not for me.
Yeah. Got it. So again, at a high level, I know you did 2 other startups before starting Founder Space. Can you just give me a high level of what those were? Did you succeed in those? Did you sell them? Like what kind of was the outcome?
Yeah. So for the next startup, it was called Xano, became Tap 11. We ended up, it was kind of entertainment combined with social media. Again, the stuff. We ended up being acquired by the YouTube founders, those guys. For their next venture. And then for the one after that, it was called Rocket On. Crazy idea again. We were doing avatars walking across the internet. So we were doing this online experience where anybody could go to any website as an avatar and chat with people, like your friends. Yeah, it was just, and we had, we raised a lot of capital for that, actually. We had Disney bidding, a huge hedge fund ended up doing the deal. But at the end of the day, people all moved to Facebook. And that game didn't work. Like these games are hit or miss. Like either they take off or they don't. So we actually, in that case, it was so I had good experiences, you kind of checkerboarded good and bad experiences. In that case, we literally gave the money back to the VCs, which is very unusual.
Yes, it is.
But honestly, people just weren't sticking. Like when you have a product, and I learned these hard lessons. Like the first product was actually, Spider Dance was a very successful product. We just got killed by the .com thing. Probably could have been fine. This one, people literally tried it and then they all end up moving to Facebook. So it's the growth plateau. And there's nothing you can do. You cannot change demand. Like no matter what we kept doing the mistake every entrepreneur makes. We're like, if we add another feature, if we just do this, if we just do that, it'll stick. Never works.
No, never works. Right. I agree. Features and functions come later on when you have something very, very well established and people are buying it and so on and so forth.
All these lessons, and I write about them in my book, Surviving a Startup, because I know what it's like to survive and to fail. Yeah. And honestly, these lessons are hard learned. Like I tell entrepreneurs, if something isn't working, like no matter how much time you put into it, no matter how passionate you are, no matter how cool it is, like everybody who saw this loved it, like everybody. But they just didn't stick. They wanted to be on Facebook, playing games on Facebook, Farmville. So I just tell people, it doesn't matter. Like you just have to see reality. That's one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur to do.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's just, get back into Founder Space. How do startups find you, and are they going to the other accelerators, or because of your 2-week situation, is that really where your sweet spot is? And they're saying, we don't have, it's not going to cost us as much money. And then how do you choose which ones you're going to accept into the accelerator?
So we run a variety of programs. So instead of having one cookie cutter model, we run different programs for different partners. Sometimes we do specialized partners for like overseas, like South Korea will want just something tailored to South Koreans, and we'll just do that. In other cases, we have different programs. So we have our educational programs. We have just tons of content on Founder Space that's free. Like for everybody, because I believe
like internet, they can just log in and see some of the content.
Yeah, we have an online startup kit, and if a person doesn't have money, it's free. Like literally, all our online programs are free. If you don't have money, if you have money, it's a small fee. But if you don't, we say we trust you. Like go in there and do it, and that's kind of our gift to any starting entrepreneur, because I've been there.
Yes.
In terms of the programs where we invest resources, our own money, time, everything else. In that case, we're very selective because we have to be. So there's 3 different types of programs. There's a free program. There's programs that are paid, and usually it's foreign governments that are paying. We take no equity in the startups. So we just run this as a service. And then the third program where we take equity, we take a smaller amount of equity, usually up to 3.5%. So it's smaller because the programs are more compact. It's a different structure. In those cases, then we vet very carefully. So we have all these criteria. In a way, we're earlier stage than most people have gotten angel funding, or they at least have a product in development. Some have products launched, but they're earlier stages. They haven't hit Series A or even pre-Series A. And we're trying to help them get to that next level, but they have to be companies we can help. And there are certain companies, like if they haven't got it yet, come to one of my courses, like online or whatever, and try to figure it out. But once you get to that level and we say, oh, you have potential, that's when you get in our program. And I can give you the specific criteria if you want.
Yeah. Well, I'm really curious because, to your point that, those that we're going to take up to 3.5%, we vet very carefully, of course, right?
Yeah.
Why are you going to put your energy into something that's, knowingly going to be a flop? So founders come to you. Not all founders can be CEOs. How do you handle that situation?
So a lot of it's hard, even with our vetting process. You cannot know people by the end of the 2 weeks.
I mean, listen, there's no panacea out there, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's 100%.
And once you work with somebody, you know them at a much deeper level than interviewing them and looking at their background. But I will tell you some of the criteria we use. So, and all VCs use this. So it's really important for people to understand. And every smart angel uses this. Number one, we look at the CEO. Like, is that CEO, are they super curious? Are they committed to this? Are they doing something that is different than ever? If you're doing what everybody else is doing, you've already lost. Like, it's over. Like, it's so hard to make it in this world. You can build a small business or a medium-sized business, but I'm talking venture funded. We're all about venture funding. So if you don't have some differentiator that is really there, forget it. The most important thing, though, is the team. Like, solopreneurs, really tough for them to succeed.
Sure.
Like, I've never seen a $1 billion company built by one person, even if it's Elon Musk, who thinks he can do anything. Like, he has other people actually doing all the work that he takes credit for. It seems like it's all him, but it's not. So when we get these entrepreneurs, how do I know if it's a great CEO? How? Like, I can look at what university they went to, but that's not necessarily an indicator.
That's not that predictable.
I can look at it whether they work for Google, but there are a lot of people at Google who won't make great entrepreneurs. They're great in a big corporation. I look at the people they attracted. Like, were they able to get not B-list talent, not A-list talent, but like A+ talent, like to join them when it's just an idea, when they have no money? Could they do that? Somebody who can do that has something special. Like, they have something, first of all, they know they need other great talent, which is a prerequisite. Secondly, they have that leadership thing. And if the CEO is going to do anything else, it's just fill those seats with really talented people. Because they're going to actually do the work. You're not going to do it. You're going to take credit for it. You're going to go out and sell, right? So sell me on your idea, on your vision, and then show me that you can deliver by bringing in this team. That's number one. Number two, really important too, is, what proof do they have? Like, do they have any idea about their market? Like, there's so many people. I don't care what idea you have. You can have the best idea in the world. I did, like, for avatars walking across the internet, seemed like the coolest thing ever. I showed it to everybody. They loved it. It didn't work. Like, is there some demonstrable proof you can give me? I think great entrepreneurs are not people with great ideas, because so many people start off in one direction and end up switching. Like YouTube, the YouTube guys, they start off as a video dating site. Google itself. I did not know that. That's interesting. And then they switched because it was failing. YouTube itself started off, Larry Page and Sergey Brin told everybody it was a nonprofit because they were making a way for academics to a search engine for them to find research paper. In those days, that was super niche. Like, only later did they figure it out. Slack was a game. Everybody thinks of Slack, but it was a tool that the game developers built for communication.
Sure.
So these, I don't care if the ideas, I like a good idea. Like, it helps to start with a great idea. But can you go into the marketplace and show me that your idea is not just sounds good, but is good? And that engagement with the customer on a deeper level, where you have actually gone and interacted with them, you have found what their pain points are. You have found not just what the pain point are of these customers, but is there a big enough pool of pent-up demand there to propel a small business into a big one?
Good.
That's the next one.
Yeah, you answered my next question. So when you talk about they have a great idea, well, is that a great idea that's going to solve a problem that needs to be solved?
Right. And
is it a need to have or a nice to have?
If it's a nice to have, they're dead in the water.
Of course they are.
They're dead.
I know that. You know that. Yeah.
The thing a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand, and I actually didn't understand this. I thought I create a great product, like my avatar's walking on the web, which seems so cool, and demand will come. I can manufacture demand. I can make people love this. You cannot do that. Like, no matter how brilliant, you could build the best, perfect product in the world. But if people aren't already, if they don't have a need for it, if they don't care about it, if it doesn't excite them, then you have nothing.
Right.
You know, you have a perfect product that's going nowhere. So it's not always like build the best mousetrap. People have to need mousetraps. First of all, they have to need those mousetraps. If you're building some, raccoon trap and they don't really care about trapping raccoons, it can be the best raccoon trap ever.
How does Founder Space make money?
So we have made money in a lot of different ways. So one is our equity. We have different revenue streams. So our equity stake, we balance that out with the services we provide to governments and corporations to train entrepreneurs.
Got it.
And we have done very high level corporate consulting for companies like Qualcomm, Huawei, Bosch, on their incubator programs, going in there with them.
Got it.
And that tends to be, they're big global corporations, very lucrative. So the balance of those three are where we make our revenue.
That's really interesting. What would you say, what bugs you about your industry, the accelerator, the incubator industry, if anything?
So there are a lot of fly-by-night operations that don't really have teams that have done it. Like, I've been there. I did it. And every instructor I hire, not every mentors have specific backgrounds like legal or whatever they're doing. But every instructor we hire has been an entrepreneur in the trenches, actually done it. Like, there are not people who have not run startups with venture funding. So that is really important for us. Me, myself, my partners have it. That is key. The other thing is, does the program match what the entrepreneur needs? A lot of times it doesn't. Like, I love to tell entrepreneurs, honestly, if you know what you're doing, you don't need an incubator or accelerator. You do not. You don't join it just for demo day. So a lot of them join it just for demo day. Like, if you know what you're doing and you have something good, you can get in front of every investor today. There is no problem. Like, investors, you can meet investors, just hustle. And you still have to hustle. Those demos, Y Combinator really has a halo effect. So they can deliver on their demo day. But a lot of these incubators, they don't deliver on their demo day. So you have to be really careful. Ask the entrepreneurs who've graduated the programs, really important. Those are the people who will tell you, it bugs me. There are a lot of them that kind of provide generic services. They don't have people who can give you real insights. So when we bring in anybody, either I'm on their board of advisors or they're in our program and I work deeply with them, I personally give them advice. And I don't sugarcoat it. I'm not there to cheerlead, but I'm not there to tear them down either. I don't believe that it just humiliate them will help them. I'm there really to figure out the puzzle of their business and from my own experience of working with all these entrepreneurs now, to see whether there's really a business model behind there, or whether there's really customer demand, and what do they need to do to prove that, not to the venture capitalists, but to themselves. How can they prove that to themselves? And spending all this time on a business plan isn't as important as the experiments you run. What you actually do in the field is and can you communicate that? And can you put that down succinctly, in a way, and communicate it to other people, employees, investors, the press, other customers? That is what startups need.
I agree. So we had talked earlier, prior to the podcast, that when the pandemic hit last year, you pretty much closed up your San Francisco operation.
Painful.
Well,
it was over a year ago now.
Yeah.
It was. Go ahead.
And how many full-time employees did you have? How many did you have to let go or furlough, or however you want to call it? And where are you now in rebuilding that, Steve?
Oh, so it was really hard, because we had some people, our instructors, our instructors, and they were our full-time people. And then we had a lot of mentors who were part-time, over 300 mentors. But all of those people, they lived off the ecosystem. This was we were a hub for them. We were really important for them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And We've done a lot of online stuff since then, but honestly, it's much harder to do. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can join an online program, but I tell you, the entrepreneurs come to it to be in person.
Yeah.
They come to it to engage because they can get a lot online already. Like there's tons of free stuff online. Like, why do you join an incubator? Because they want the community. They want to be with the other entrepreneurs. They want to be with us as people and us to really talk to them. We've done programs online all over the world during the pandemic, but I would say, they're hard to monetize. Like it's hard to get people to pay for them. And it's hard to give the same value that they would give. And so we haven't been charging equity or anything like that. A lot of our programs have been free. So, but fortunately, we do have incubators open overseas. Right now, China is a walled garden in terms of many ways, right? Internet, politically, but also COVID-wise. Like they've kept COVID out. Like people are not wearing masks and doing business there because they really have squashed it. But you could only do that in a country like China, not in the US. And for many reasons.
Yes.
But our incubators are all open there. They're all open and fully functional. So I haven't been there, but they've been running.
Wow, that's really interesting. So I mean, do you know what the plan is to build back your office here in the States?
We're figuring that out right now. We're monitoring this second wave of COVID. It's really expensive to get a lease in the city, even with the reduced prices now. You want to be sure that you're not going to be shut down after signing a 3-year lease, 6 months into it, because that's pretty brutal. We had to go through that already. And that was really hard, especially on my partner who owned all this, who was the leaseholder and had to negotiate with the landlord. And oh my God. So we're being very cautious. So we're still continuing online. And then we will look at options, like which options we do, who we partner with, what we do. Like I said, overseas, we're still running programs. So I honestly don't know. And this is being a startup, right? I've been a startup before. I do this because I love doing it, right? And I'm not going to do it in an unintelligent way. But as long as I'm engaging with startups, which I've continued to do, it's rewarding enough for me. And I'll just let fate determine where we're rolling with the punches.
Have you considered? I just sort of had like an epiphany. Have you considered opening in a different city where you're not dealing with what California's dealing with? Like, Denver, like Boulder, for example? Yeah,
there are a lot of cities that are more lenient. Like San Francisco is one of the strstrictest cities in the country. Yeah. So they shut everything down. They shut it down.
Boulder, I don't believe is ever going to become Silicon Valley. I think they're probably maybe 20 years behind Silicon Valley, but there's opportunity there. Yeah,
Boulder. So we have considered that, although the Bay Area is my home. Yeah, and some of running Founder Space is honestly, at my stage, it's a lifestyle thing. Like, I don't want to have to commute. I don't necessarily want to have to, we do have partners overseas because I couldn't do those, right? Yes. And it opened up and so many of our customers were overseas. That's where we really made our business, made our name. We did that, but they run those shows. Like we're kind of layered on top of them, but they're doing the day-to-day. So I don't have to worry about that. We have had offers across the United States and we are considering, but even with COVID, like with my own situation, I don't want to get COVID. So I'm still being careful. I've been vaccinated, but at the same time, you can still even get it when you're vaccinated. Yeah. So I've tended to err on the careful side. And so some of that reflects our business. I'm not out just to maximize our profit. Okay. I'm also, concerned with my own health and the health of the people.
Listen, that's a perfectly reasonable concern to have.
Yeah.
If somebody listening to this is thinking, I'd like to get involved as a mentor, or there's some really interesting things I think I could provide value here. What would you suggest that person do?
Oh, so if anybody wants to get involved as a mentor, if somebody wants to submit their business plan or take advantage of all our free stuff, even better, just go to founderspace.com. Literally there's a contact form on the front page. You can click the button, goes to a contact form. If you put my name in it, it will come to me. I respond to the email. Can't always help everybody, but I do respond. You will get a response.
Well, that's fantastic. And before we finish up here, I do want to put a plug in that you've written 3 books.
I have.
Talked about one of them. Tell me just a tiny bit about the other 2.
Yeah, I've been very prolific. So my first book, Make Elephants Fly, is all about the process of radical innovation. So it's how startups innovate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the elephant is your big idea, how do you get it off the ground?
Sure.
What do you do? So that book has done very well, especially like in China, like it's a bestseller. All my books are bestsellers in China.
Really? That's so interesting.
It's weird. I went to China at just the right time. I became super famous there, like super famous.
Wow.
And my books.
I'll be asking for your autograph here any minute. I think.
Yeah, but I'm not as famous in the U.S. Like I'm well known in Silicon Valley, but outside Silicon Valley, not as crazy. So Make Elephants Fly, Then Surviving a Startup, published by HarperCollins, is my new book. And I have another new book because of COVID. I was doing a lot of writing. It just came out. It's called The 5 Forces That Change Everything. And it is my passion. It is about how technology is going to transform humanity and our lives. Yeah. So what I really tried to do is there's all this new technology, brain-computer interfaces, literally sticking chips in your brain. What does that mean? Augmented reality, virtual reality, gene editing, nanotech, all of these technologies create fundamental moral and ethical issues that how are they going to enter society? What's going to be their impact? But also, what are the key decisions humanity must make right now to use these responsibly? Because these technologies are exponentially more powerful than anything we've done in the past. Yeah. I mean, if somebody hacks your smartphone, it's a real pain, right? They can steal your identity. Somebody hacks your brain with a brain computer chip, they can steal your actual identity. This will be coming. I've worked on this technology. It is coming. If we're going to be injecting nanoparticles into our bodies, and into the world. What do these things do? What will be the repercussions? Could they run amok? Gene editing. There are gene drives out there. You can unleash these animals that breed and with genetic alterations. Hugely impactful. Designer babies. All these issues fascinated me because I work with entrepreneurs and scientists all over the world, and I wanted to explore them. So I spent big part of COVID researching and writing this book.
Well, that's really interesting. Gosh. Well, Steve Hoffman, founder and CEO of Founders Space. Thanks so much for joining me. This was a really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Carol. I love your interview style.
Well,
very direct.
My pleasure.
Really, like you get at it. I love it. You're not shy at all.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to Authentically Successful. If you are a successful founder or CEO who would like to be on this program, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast/apply. If you learned something from this interview and it made a difference, please share it on LinkedIn or Twitter. You can also do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend. And if you know of someone who would be a great guest, tag them on LinkedIn or Twitter to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Authentically Successful. I love seeing your posts and great suggestions. Lastly, we are regularly putting out new episodes and content. And to make sure you don't miss any episodes, please subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. If you want to know more, go to our website, verticalelevation.com, or follow me on LinkedIn. This is Carol Schultz. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.